Hey guys, my name is Nick and welcome back to the channel and welcome to a quick update video on the Adeptus Custodes bonus project for 2020. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at the heavy Telemon Dreadnought build from Forgeworld. It's a fairly abridged video. I've done a lot of Forgeworld build videos before. A lot of the techniques apply to this particular build. But this one's pretty cool because there's already some pre-drilled magnet holes from Forgeworld. So we'll just cover which sizes you need and the approach that I've taken to building this big dreadnought. Let's get straight into the video. So the first thing we need to do, as with any Forgeworld build, is make sure we've got everything as part of the layout instructions. Most Forgeworld instructions these days are actually pretty good compared to the old ropey photocopies. Telemon Dreadnought has been around a while, should be okay. So I've taken a few steps ahead here. I've cleaned every component up first so that we can take a look and make sure that everything is laid out. And I would typically lay it out as per the instructions so that you know where everything is and what you've got, what you haven't got. Two pieces to be really aware of are these two little missile vents. They're tiny little things, may have popped off the actual frame that you've got or off the injection mould. I dropped one into a dustbin which is below my desk and took me an hour to find it. So just a heads up, those two pieces are tiny and may be floating around in the bag. Two separate pieces to the heavy dreadnought are the weapon options. There are, I think, 3 different types of arm weapons. So you've got the Telemon fist, and then you've got 2 different weapons. I think the Iliastus and the Blaze Cannon, I think, are the 2 names for it. Fortunately, Forgeworld are now super forward thinking and make magnetizing a breeze with this kit. But before we get to the magnetizing, we're going to put them together. So the first thing we need is all the equipment to do that. So I've got a bit of JB Weld, I've got my scalpel, I've put a fresh blade onto that, I've got some clippers and some super glue and some needle files. You will need that if you want to clear it up all properly. And a very fine grain bit of sandpaper, cotton buds that I use for JB Weld. I'm not always going to use JB Weld. I just got it ready depending on the load bearing of the model. In the instructions though, it tells you to build the legs first. I'm going to skip that. I'm going to do the torso first and get all the fixed components done so that you can then work on the leg pose. Dreadnoughts from Forgeworld have got really poseable legs in the most part. And you really want to make sure that's as dynamic as you want to go. So I tend to build the fixed elements first. In this case, that's most of the torso. So I'm going to dry fit all of that. Then we'll come back and do the legs, because then you can balance the torso on top of the legs and get that kind of dynamic pose that you want, rather than do the legs and then have to go, oh, I'm not quite sure the way that works with the torso, with the arms and so on. There's a whole bunch of pieces that we can do first. So the back vents, the head cover, the big shoulder pads, all of that good stuff. We can actually just make sure that that is all right. Remember, you need to put the head in first before you put that top section on, otherwise the head doesn't fit. So some people do paint the head separately, and then you're going to have to paint that top canopy section separately as well, and then glue that on afterwards. If there are any gaps though, you will have to fill those and then paint. I'm going to go with gluing it all together because I can, and that's the way it's going to be. Anyway, we've got a top missile section as well, so that fits on a little pivot point, and we can magnetize that. As I said at the start of the video, Forgeworld are getting to grips with magnets, which is so good to see, rather than having to drill stuff out. We now have magnet holes. So we're going to need those a little bit later on. So what we're going to do is just dry fit, make sure that we're happy with how everything goes together in my mind, and then we can start getting the glue in. So you can see here we've got lots of ball joints. Everything is very poseable. So we've got the pieces that drop onto the lower arms here. So this is the upper arm section. You can see there's movement in there. We can mess around with the pose. And then we've got the tilt around the weapon arms. One good thing to do is to have the weapons ready. So what I've done is just got the weapons out of those little clam boxes, because as part of the posing of this thing, you want to get it right. And you can see here, there's the magnet hole. Look at that. So I'm going to get the weapons ready so that I can work on the pose, so I know which whether I'm going to go left or right-handed with the weapons. And these are the magnets that we're going to be using. The holes here are 5mm by 2mm magnets. I've only got one 5x2 left, so I'm actually going to use stacked 5x1mm. makes no real odds. 5x1 at 34N, I think it is, or N34, perfectly suitable for the job that we've got here. So I've got my magnet stack ready to go. But yeah, 5x2 is the right number, but 5x1 stacked will equally work. As usual, I've done Forgeworld build guides before. When you're gluing two surfaces together, after you've thoroughly cleaned the model, or in my case, I'm going to actually clean it afterwards, you should always score and roughen the surfaces of the two mating points, because they're resin, they're smooth, they're shiny. So what you want to do is take a scalpel, a bit of sandpaper, rough those edges up, give that glue or adhesive that you're using something to bind to. So I've now glued the rear exhaust system onto the model, having scored it, and then I've used regular super glue for that, or Gorilla Gel. Scoring the surfaces, I'm going to try and zoom in here, see if we can get a bit of close-up focus. Camera's not great at this kind of range, we'll back up. That's a bit better. But yeah, we're just going to move the head around into some jaunty angle, basically left or right. But again, score the surfaces of any piece that's going to go in afterwards. Always test fit. You know, this is one of those things where you want to test fit twice and glue once, especially if you start using JB Wild. You're not going to get that stuff off in a hurry. So we've got the top cowling and we've got the head to go in. So a little blob of super glue just for the head. Get that in first. And there we go. Just pop that little fella in there. As I said, you can paint that head separately if you really want to. There's not a huge amount to it, but if you really want to be a perfectionist, and I know some people really like to go to town on faces and heads and get that added detail on, then you want to do this separately. But I'm quite happy to go ahead here. And then all we're going to do then is put that top cowling piece on as well. And there you go, that's quite a snug fit there. But again, one of those things where you do want to measure it and make sure that it does fit before you glue, because even if it's just a millimetre out, then it's going to cause you a problem. So you might need to sand and file just to get that in. But that is a big chunk of the torso resin all put together. So we're just going to put that to one side, just making sure that all the surfaces are flush and mated together. So that is going to be put to one side. As you can see, this is where the magnets go for the top weapon as well. So we're now going to take the hip joint. Just get this all ready to go as well. So what we're going to do is rough up the ball joint as part of the ball and socket joint. Cut into it a little bit. Give that glue something to purchase to. Just be super careful with the very sharp scalpel blade. Just scrape away any of that sort of top covering of resin, the real shiny stuff. Make sure you get to that little bit underneath. And the same in the ball joints, ready for the upper thighs to go into as well. Give those a little bit of a score and a bit of a rough up. Just adds that bit of purchase. Then the ball joint, or the hip joint, sorry, is probably the most weight-bearing piece here, because you've got the entire torso going on there, and then that's going to spread the load of that torso weight onto the upper thighs. The thighs do only go one way round, so you're looking for the curved panel of the upper thigh joint to come forwards. So that is, you can see there's a squared off bit at the back, curved bit goes to the front. So in this case, and then get the torso or the hip joint the right way around as well. So you want all the ones with the verdigris, all the pretty patterns on the front, the filigree, sorry, not verdigris, towards the front. And then we've got the two legs that go like that. So we're just going to be ready to go with those. We're just sort of preparing pieces whilst other bits and pieces are drying. So while that torso is drying, we're just having a look at some of the other posability options. Now we do get 3 feet. Quite often a lot of walkers from Forgeworld come with multiple feet. You get one with a slightly raised toe to give it a bit more of an aggressive forward walking pose. And then we've got 2 flat ones as well for a more flat and braced position. I'm going to go with a jaunty toe, with one of the slightly bendy toes. And this is where it's going to get a bit more interesting to try and put this together. So I'm going to use the aid of some blue tack to try and help this. You can use maybe some small pins or something along those lines, or a very light amount of super glue, so that it's easy to snap and break afterwards if you maybe stick it in the fridge. But this is where you really want to be super careful, because the legs on any Forgeworld walker set the entire pose for the model. So what we've got these lower shin joints. There's a little bit of manoeuvrability on those, a little bit of left and right, but a fair amount forward and backwards so we can get the lower leg pose. Just cleaning up some of the pieces here. I did miss a little bit of a line there. It's the joys of dry fitting and test fitting. If something doesn't look right, you can just get in there and adjust it as you go through. So we got 2 of those. Just going to double check that one as well. I think that one is okay. No, a little bit to come off there. A little bit of flash mould. But building the legs is key to the pose of the model. Now, not all Forgeworld models, they are fairly poseable, but sometimes there is a limitation on how far you can move things around before they start to look a bit wobbly. But also that enables you to, you know, if you're going to go with a very scenic base, you can put 1 foot up striding forwards, or you can have 1 foot off the ground. You can have 1 foot standing on, you know, the dead foes of the enemy. Plenty of options. I'm going to go fairly flat-footed, but with 1 leg striding forwards, and you can see there the manoeuvrability between the ankle and the lower leg here. So once you've worked out your pose, now it's very difficult to do that on camera, and you can see there's not a huge amount of manoeuvrability with this particular kit if you're going to remain flat-footed and leave the torso relatively flat and not leaning forward. Now I tend to go with that kind of style. I think it looks all right. So the other 2 pieces that we want to put on at the fixed stage are the big shoulder pads. They go straight on, and when you were building the legs, this enabled you to be able to mess around with that torso and get that pose that you wanted. If you are going for that more aggressive running 1-legged off the floor, 1 leg raised, standing on the enemies or on a piece of terrain or whatever, having that torso piece available to mess around with and the weapons built to mess around with gets that pose right for you. You can see there's a little bit of twist in that torso as well, so you can have him, you know, leaning over his leading leg or twisting to the right or whatever. And if you really want to store this in multiple parts, at this point you may want to magnetize and pin that central ball joint into the torso. I've got enough storage that I'm going to glue this all together. So what we can now look at are the arms. So you didn't really need the arms. I mean, I did when I was posing it. I blue tacked the arms on just to get sort of the weapon position. But because they're going to be on magnets, they twist around a little bit. You do get that variance in pose without it being glued in position. So with the weapon sort of hand put together, I'm trying to work out the posability here. It's quite difficult because you've got, you know, sort of 4 moving parts here. But it's just one of those things where you just want to play around and test, wiggle where you want things to go. Now I want the gun, so I've got the left foot backwards and the right foot forwards. Therefore I want the opposite arm to be forwards to the backwards leg. So the left arm needs to be further forwards than the right arm, otherwise he looks a bit odd. So if you have a striding model, imagine how you naturally walk. Left foot forward is right arm forward, right leg forward, left arm forward. So if you're going to try and work on that, that's what you want to try and look at as well. So it gives it a bit of a natural stride. So what we're going to do is just jump ahead and grab the other weapon. So the Telemon combat weapon, I'm going to put that together. And I've put the arms in, so you can see that right arm is now more further pointing backwards, and the left arm is slightly more forwards, which is the opposite to the legs. That makes it a little bit more natural looking. I'm going with so you've got a choice here. Both weapons fit on either arm until you put on the little wing sections. There's these little wings that you can see at the top of the screen there. They determine whether you're left or righted, and you fit them into the little cavities that are on here. So the little small ones here, the little wing sections, if you really wanted to, you could leave them off and not worry about whether you want to go left or right-handed here, and then gives you the entire freedom. But I'm going to put them on just because I think they look cool and they're fitting to the model. But generally, you could just leave them off. Right, so now it's time to look at the magnets. As I said earlier in the video, 5mm by 2mm is the right number for the pre-drilled holes that Forgeworld have given us. Make sure your orientation is correct. I've got 5x1 and a couple of 5x2 or one 5x2mm magnet. Do the same on the weapons, and this is where we get to. So you can see there, that's ready to glue on there. But the weapons all now have their magnets. Now, fortunately, you know, this is This is brave new ground for Forgeworld, because they tend to like to sell you another model so that you don't have to mess around with magnets. Whereas the real world, you know, they give us the weapon options. We're going to magnetize whether they like it or not. So it's nice that they've taken this route. So once again, we're just going to glue that torso to the legs. We're going to rough up the ball and socket joints, and then we're going to apply some super glue. Now in this build, even though I had the JB World on standby, and as much as I love JB World, didn't feel the need to use it in this particular build. It is quite messy stuff to use, and I didn't want it sort of bleeding out and having to spend a lot of time cleaning up. So we go with a slightly jaunty angle, twisted to the left a little bit, but super glue gel will work. I'm just going to put that to just leave that to dry, and it goes off pretty quick, to be honest. And that's the torso all built, or the body built, and then we can just mess around with the weapon options and show you how they magnetize on. We get a few spares with this kit. On the Power Fist, the Telemon Fist, you've got some open and closed finger joints. Then you've got the opposite wing areas for the weapons, so you could have left or right weapons. And then you've got the spare foot. So all those little pieces you can see at the top of the screen are leftovers from this. We'll put the glue away, and then we just clip on the weapons, and you can show you the magnetizing that I've done. So remember these are 5x1, but I've double stacked them. So we can clip these on and show you the final build. And there's that little wing option that I've glued on there, just to make sure that weapon is now fixed as a left-handed. So the missile goes on top. That's the left-handed ranged weapon, and then his close combat weapon, and there we go. Pretty simple. Bit of a beefy Dreadnought. Got to get some paint on him now. And just by way of scale, I'm going to bring in the Galatus guy, Contemptor Galatus, one with the big shield and sword, just so you can see what heavy Dreadnought is compared to a regular one. And you can see he's another 30% on top, and big and super beefy. There we go then, guys. The heavy Telemon Dreadnought is now built, ready for washing. So I tend to build first and then dunk it in the warm soapy water with the toothbrush. Give it a good scrub before we apply any paintwork to it, just to make sure that the bonding release agent, the mold release agent, is clear before we apply any paint. Otherwise, the paint will go to the dogs, really. Let's be honest. But if you haven't done it at a Forgeworld model, you might not be aware of that. So there we go. But yeah, we're ready to prime. The UK weather at the moment is glorious, but we can only go as far as our back garden. So not a problem there then, is there really? It's time to get priming. So the next update should see this guy at least in gold. I will be priming it in black first, then adding the Retributor Armor gold spray. I'm hoping I've got enough gold left to complete this project for the priming side of things before I run out, because that would be a bit tragic. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this quick build video. If you did, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe, and I shall catch you guys on the next video.